We're not talking about James Harden pulling a Dothraki army in the first 47 seconds of battle at Winterfell, where that light slowly gets extinguished and a few stragglers come running back to the Unsullied, right? Like, we're not talking about that being James Harden. We're talking about the officiating. Well, last night, where Harden deserves a lot of credit, especially coming into game 2 with a target on his back, where he deserves a ton of credit is by getting hit in the face coming back into the game. You saw it, and if you didn't, you've seen the memes so far today. The man has become a crying Jordan-level meme for having bloodshot eyes because he was smacked in the face by Draymond. No call. No call. And if I'm Harden coming in, where I have made my point, and my organization has my back, talking about a lack of calls to benefit me, a reigning MVP, and in a lot of people's eyes, including my own, deserves to be a 2-time MVP, and you get hit in the face on national television, and you don't get a call? I'm losing it. If I'm even coming back in that game after the x-rays were negative, thank goodness, but I am losing my mind. And Harden didn't do that. Because before he got hurt with, what did we say, 6:07? Is that what we said, about 6:07 in the first quarter? 6:27. When he leaves at 6:27 because he is temporarily blinded to go get those x-rays, and he comes back with 7:09 to play in the second quarter. So it's about 11 minutes of game action. Scoreless to that point. So even when he had 2 good eyes, 2 working eyes, he had as many points as all of us listening to this. He comes back in, and he's not mad. Maybe he's mad, but he's not letting it get the best of him. He's not letting it distract him. He comes back into that game and goes for 29 points. He matches Kevin Durant's point total. I want to make sure I have this right. Harden played 34 minutes, and I got Durant going for 44. So in 10 fewer minutes, he had as many points as Kevin Durant. I give Harden a lot of credit for coming back in that game. But I also know, and so do you, that what we heard from Draymond Green, saying that the whining and complaining about the officiating was embarrassing, we know who he's talking about.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and you can always get in touch with the show through the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed.
Of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get to a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screening questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search Indeed. My sincere apologies to my audience out there and to my man Tim Legler for the technical difficulties. I completely lost you, Tim. My apologies. I'm sorry, but I got you back right now. So let's get right back into it. Who do you have winning this series with Boston and Milwaukee?
Oh, man, it got a lot harder after their performance in Game 1, I'll tell you that, because Boston, I thought, in that game, that was about as clean a performance as I've seen on both ends of the floor by any team in the postseason. So that started to confuse my mind because going into it, I was all on Milwaukee. And so I think their performance in Game 2 has reassured me that they're going to be able to do it because what I watched all year was real. It wasn't an aberration. That's a team that plays both ends of the floor. They've got a star that, I know he's got issues with his perimeter shooting, but he's so dominant in getting to his spot on the floor. I don't see that changing in the way that he attacks the rim, attacks the paint, and the dominance that Antetokounmpo has, the three-point shooters around him, but the great coaching. I'm going to go with the Bucks, man. I think they're going to get a split in Boston and make this a best-of-3 series, and they'll get 2 of those 3 at home, and they had more wins than any team in the league for a reason. So I'm going to stick with the Bucks, but I was a little bit rattled in that pick after the first game. There's no question because they look tight, they look nervous. Chris Middleton, I think, really helped relax the entire team with his performance in the first.
And they get Brogdon back. And they get Brogdon back soon, don't they, Tim?
That's a big one. That's a big one. Look, when the guy's been out that long, he's going to help them because he's another really good ball screen player with the ball. He's probably their second best ball screen player that they have. Good open three-point shooter, but he could be rusty. He could have some issues finding his rhythm in the remainder of this series. He'll get better as it goes on, maybe beyond this round, and pay more dividends. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect from him, but there's no question a team that doesn't have a ton of depth to get Brogdon back is a big boost. I think just for me, they look so much more relaxed over the last, say, 30 minutes of that game the other night. It led me to believe they were just suffering from a severe case of nerves playing in front of their home crowd against a team that beat them last year. And maybe they exorcised those demons as they had the Boston. Because Boston's got their own problems, Stephen A. I mean, where's Jason Tatum? I can't believe how quiet Jason Tatum is.
I can't believe it, Tim. Let me tell you something right now. I picked Boston, but it's strictly emotional because I picked Boston at the beginning of the season. And you know how I am about jumping off the bandwagon. That's not my last name is not Kellerman. It's Stephen A. Smith, hey brother. I'm gonna go down with the ship. But I gotta tell you something. I know that Milwaukee's the better team. I know that Milwaukee should win this series. But I know that if Boston plays its best, they could do it. I don't know what the hell has happened to Jason Tatum, but I will tell you what I think happened to the Celtics. I think at the beginning of the season, Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge made a colossal mistake by immediately inserting Gordon Hayward into the lineup. He clearly wasn't ready, and I think it compromised the chemistry and, dare I say, the culture that had been built on this team. If they had waited till the All-Star break, brought him along slowly, let him come off the bench, Tim, I think Boston would have been better off. To that you say what?
No, I think, look, there's no question they had issues with that at the start of the year, and it wasn't just because of Gordon Hayward. It was also Kyrie Irving coming back into the mix, and now you've got a group of young guys, Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, went to the conference finals basically without those guys, had all kinds of responsibility, freedom, playing time, touches, minutes, you name it, and now you add these two guys in, the message is, okay, all of you guys need to do a little bit less and we'll be better off in the long run. That's a hard sell to young players. So there was no question it affected their chemistry the first half of the season. But here's what I will say. When they got to the playoffs, right, and the way that they have looked for the most part, it almost looked like somebody just grabbed some smelling salts, right, and gave it to these guys and said, hey, man, the playoffs are here. Forget all that stuff now. It's all about this because this ultimately is what we play for as professional players. And we're here now because they've been sharp and crisp. But what's going on with Jason Tatum, I have absolutely no idea. The other night, I was making notes like I normally do when I'm watching the game, and I went probably 6-minute stretch. He was on the floor the whole time, and I didn't write his name down one time. I can't think of that happening at any other game this year in some capacity because I'm making notes on almost every possession. And I'm looking at my notes. I'm going, I didn't have Jason Tatum written down, and he was in the game the entire time. That's how quiet he has been. It's really strange. And I'm sure, I've been up in Boston. I don't know if you have, but I would love to know what the sports talk radio and the media is like up in Boston about Jason Tatum right now because he has 9 points in 2 games.
4.5 points. Unbelievable. We're talking to the great Tim Legler right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Real quick, because this series doesn't appear to be that compelling to most people, but damn it, Damian Lillard, Dame Time. We saw what he did in the first round against Russell Westbrook. We know what Jokic can do with the Denver Nuggets. Who do you have winning this series real quickly?
I'm going to go with Denver, and I originally picked that to be an all-home game series, meaning the home team wins all 7 because Denver best record in the West at home, Portland's second best record at home in the West, and I just think that those two teams' role players play so much better in their own building. Mm-hmm. But now Portland gets one, Denver's more than capable of getting one in Portland, so I think it will still get up to a best-of-3 series, and Denver's going to win that, I think. But the thing is, Denver's going to be, if it's Denver Golden State, you saw the way Denver played against Golden State the last 2 times, it was laughable. So I almost think Portland would be a better series if it ends up being the Warriors. I think Portland might be the team that could give them at least more competition than what Denver gave Golden State the last 2 times they played.
Tim Legler right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's get to this series because I'm in Houston, Texas. Obviously, I'm here because I'm covering the series. We saw what James Harden what happened with him in his eyes. We also saw that Kevin Durant, he's shooting at 42%. That's uncommon for him because we know how efficient he is. Nevertheless, Golden State is up 2-0 in this series. In your estimation, why are they up 2-0 in this series, and how do you see the rest of this series unfolding?
Well, I think they're up 2-0 for a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, I think, we made so much of the officiating after the first game. I know I myself did a lot of breakdowns on SportsCenter on this topic and how they missed some on Harden early. Then there were other ones that were non-calls that were correct non-calls later. because of that jackknifing thing he does with his legs, kicking up into people's space when they're trying to close out on him. I think that now became such a talking point that the emphasis in Game 2 is for James Harden to stay upright and not end up on his backside 8 to 10 times a game when he's shooting three-point shots. And I think it's thrown their team off. They're counting on getting that. And now that's something they're not going to get. Now, look, they're not as good as Golden State anyway, but they had to get that in order to make this a series. I looked it up. A couple years ago, they played Oklahoma City in the first round, Houston. Beat them 5 games. In those 5 games, they got fouled 13 times on three-point shots. They made 38 out of 39 free throws. So do the math on that, Stephen A. That's almost 8 points a game. That's how important getting those calls is to their offense. And so I think that's an issue for them moving forward because there's so much scrutiny on it now. He's not going to get the same calls he's been getting over the last couple of years, not in this series, not with as much attention as being paid to that right now. So that's one thing. But then the other thing, last point on them, the other thing is, the differentiating factor between these two teams is Kevin Durant, period. They don't have an answer for Kevin Durant. He's the only guy in this series that can get off a clean shot, even against good defense, whenever he wants to. And if Houston's going to continually switch, Kevin Durant is going to continue to torch them. And he just missed some shots last game, so shooting percentage wasn't great. But for me, what he did in the first game, the way he operated every time he got a switch, the smaller guy shoot over him, bigger guy go around him. And he did most of that for the most part in the second game. He just missed some open looks, and that's not going to change. They don't have the personnel, if they're going to switch, to slow him down. He's in such a rhythm right now. For me, ultimately, Kevin Durant puts Golden State Warriors on a completely different plane from the Houston Rockets.
Okay, Tim Legler, let me ask you this question. Well, let's go back to Harden and the Rockets for a second, because two-part question. Number one, I want to know whether or not you think Harden and his style of play and the style of play in Houston is good for basketball, or because he's still ball dominant. But number two, and more importantly, I want to know why Harden's taking all the heat. I know that he's the reigning league MVP. I think he should be the 2-time reigning league MVP once the vote comes in, the way he carried them this year. But the flip side to this, Tim, I'm looking at CP3, who got a $160 million deal. I'm looking at D'Antoni, an offensive genius who's never coached in an NBA Finals. I'm looking at Daryl Morey, who's assembled this roster, this squad, this coach. And I'm wondering, is it fair to have everything placed on the shoulders of James Harden when we have to take into consideration what he's going up against in Durant, Curry, Thompson?
No, and I feel, look, as far as any team losing to the Warriors and anybody taking too much undue criticism, it's silly. When you're talking about a team that's an all-time great team, you can't expect the Houston Rockets to beat them. I don't care what James Harden's stretch looked like during this year, for that couple of months when he averaged 40 a game. I don't care, how much better their defense got down the stretch, and they look like a physical team that now can match up with Golden State. It doesn't matter. They're not on their level. So you can't expect to beat that team. You just can't. It's not realistic for anybody to think that the Houston Rockets are supposed to win this series. Having said that, you're right about placing blame in other parts of the organization, on the roster, coaching, front office, you name it. But here's what I will say about James Harden, why I think he does take a lot of the blame for the way their team looks sometimes. I don't think you could play any other way with James Harden. He will not move without the basketball. So,
Tim, are you sure about that, Tim? Tim, are you sure about that?
Positive. See, Stephen A., look what James Harden does in the 12 to 15 possessions now that he's not the primary guy. When Chris Paul is the primary ball handler and Harden's on the floor, he doesn't make it past the logo. He stands at the logo.
But Tim, hold on, Tim. Here's my question to you, because nobody would know this better than you. Here's my question. Is that because of him, or is it because D'Antoni says that's cool? Do that.
Here's what I think. I think Mike D'Antoni got his hands on James Harden, and I think some of the reluctance for James Harden to play any other way made Mike D'Antoni say, okay, this is how we're going to play. Now, it just so happens that James Harden might be the best we've ever seen at this style of basketball.
I got it, but hold on. Hold that thought for one. Hold on, Tim. Hold on.
You win a lot of games that way.
Right.
But it's not like they came down that way every single time down the floor when Phoenix.
No, but stay with me, Tim. Stay with me, because I'm just curious. I'm not even debating you. I'm just curious because I want to be very clear. D'Antoni did that. This is my argument against that notion, just for sake of argument. D'Antoni did it with Nash. D'Antoni tried to do it a little bit with Marbury. D'Antoni, if you recall, did it with Jeremy Lin. He did it with Kobe. So what I'm saying.
Wait a second. I want to go back. I want to go back to your Nash point first of all. I would love to sit down with you, and put two TVs next to each other. You and I sit on a sofa and watch a game of the Phoenix Suns at their peak and their height when that team that he had out there was Stoudemire and those guys. And then next to it, a team of the Houston Rockets over the last couple of years.
That's fair, Tim.
There is
That's
no
fair.
comparison.
That's fair.
Between
That's fair.
Well, here's what my point is, just in terms of the primary ball handler, Steve Nash moved without the ball. Steve Nash was all over the court. James Harden, look, he's unstoppable in what he does. Like, what he does is amazing to me. You asked me if it was good for basketball. My initial answer would be no. And the reason is, when I think of beautiful basketball, that's not what comes to mind. Basketball's a sport at its best for me is when that ball is moving around and hopping, and guys are cutting, screaming for each other, and you're cutting hard even though you won't get the ball, and there's player movement and ball movement, and there's shot making throughout the roster. That's beautiful basketball to me. To watch a guy play the way that he plays, do I think that's aesthetically beautiful basketball and AKA good for the league? No, I don't. But at the same time, I admire what he has done because I don't think there's another player maybe that's ever lived that could pull off what he's pulled off playing that style and still be this unstoppable because there's never been a guy in the league, Stephen A., that had this combination of handle, shooting range, and strength. There's just never been a guy that's got all three of those things.
Well, I appreciate the education because I certainly wasn't trying to imply that Nash held the ball as much as Harden did in terms of going ISO. I was just talking about being that lead dog that everything ran through. But you're absolutely right. Nobody handles the ball in D'Antoni's system to the degree that James Harden does. I do that. I'll take that in. You're absolutely right. But what does that say about CP3 now? If that's going to be the case, do you believe that Houston may have made a mistake investing $160 million in CP3 in light of just what you just outlined?
Oh, clearly, I said that at the time. There's no way I would be cutting that check. But if they were in a situation though, I will say this: when it came time to give him that money, they were all in on James Harden. They're all in on this style, right? So they looked at it like we already had him. We're going to have to go ahead and spend that money because you're going to have a window here for a number of years where you're going to be able to contend with James Harden. You're going to have to go ahead and re-sign a guy like Chris Paul in that situation because now you've got two different guys that can run that kind of offense. You've got the dual threat of having multiple elite level playmakers in ball screen offense on either side of the floor. You had to commit to it. I understand why they did it, but if you're just talking about dollar for dollar, what you were going to get and the return on that, no, that there's no way that I would have been able to sleep at night if I was the guy having to sign those checks at that time when I gave him that deal because I just didn't see it at this stage of his career. Number one, being a guy that's reliably healthy. And secondly, is he going to be able to, when they're playing that style, is he going to be able to, with the ball out of his hands 70% of the time, are you maxing out your investment in Chris Paul? I think their offense is in some ways almost hinders Chris Paul's ability to even look like he can earn that money.
So does Harden have the right coach for him in Houston with Mike D'Antoni? Or if the Houston Rockets are going to propel themselves to elevated heights, they might need to go in a different direction. And I don't ask that question to be critical of Mike D'Antoni. Man, they're winning games. They're winning 50-plus games last year, 60-plus games. They got to within one game of the NBA Finals. It's not to cast any aspersions on them. It's just to look at the talent that is James Harden, asking how long can he continue to do what he's been doing this way before he wears out. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah, and here's my answer to that. He has the perfect coach in Houston. And in fact, maybe the only guy that could coach James Harden and get this level of production out of him because any other coach, you and I could sit here and juggle names around that we think are the best coaches in the league, and we're going to have similar guys on that list of top 5, top 7, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Those guys, the way that they believe offense is supposed to look, they're going to, I'm telling you, they're going to get their hands on James Harden and realize, okay, he doesn't run the floor ahead of the ball. So that's one thing right there. Like, he will not begin a possession unless he's the last guy off the floor with the basketball. So right off the bat, you're taking your best player, and think about the wing players and the elite level wings and scorers in this league that handle the ball a lot. Those guys run ahead. They run ahead sometimes. James Harden's not running ahead. James Harden, if he is not involved in the action that's going to determine his possession, he would much rather stand over by the logo and chill. So my point is, if Mike D'Antoni has figured out a way to make this work with this guy and accepted that this is the offense we're going to run, there are very few coaches that watch that style that think, oh, I'd love to get my hands on James Harden, because I think a lot of people think that's the only way he can play, and ultimately that way can't win a championship.
Hey, listen, man, I totally agree with you because, listen, I asked the question because I got to ask the question. That's part of the job, but there's no question about it. I think that Mike D'Antoni's the perfect coach for James Harden, and I think he's a damn good coach, knows what the hell he's doing, and I like how fiery he gets as well. I just don't know if he's the answer to win a championship going up against teams that prioritize other facets of the game of basketball, not just offense. But that's just me, Tim Legler. But I can't take away from the fact that he's a pretty damn good coach. And I don't blame Daryl Morey for hiring him one bit when you consider the fact that they were all in on Harden. That was the way to go with Mike D'Antoni.
Stephen A., one last point on that.
Yep.
One last point on
Go
that.
ahead.
And a testament to the greatness that James Harden is as an offensive player and the way he controls games, unlike just about any guy I've ever seen. If it wasn't for this all-time great team in their way, maybe it would be good enough against what the rest of the league looks like right now. The problem is they're going to burn up all these years with this juggernaut that they can't get past.
Well, I'll
and
tell you
you're
this,
gonna see it again in this
but
series.
Tim, that's your position. I will tell you this. I felt that exact same way until I saw Houston go to Milwaukee with that size, the length of all of those defenders, and the style that Houston plays. I said that would be a bad matchup for Houston, too, if they were to go to the finals and had to play Milwaukee.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm not saying they would necessarily either, but I'm saying the bottom line is we're never going to know, because they got to get past this one team.
Yeah.
And this is the fourth time in 5 years of playing these guys in the playoffs?
Yep.
You know, this is where the road map. You look at they got a map of their season. The road ends every year at the same dead end in Golden State. And now look, there might be some changes this summer. We all know. We speculated on that enough. We'll see how that plays out with KD. But I personally believe, and I've called it before, James Harden would refer to this situation as basketball nirvana. This is as good as it could ever get for him, because he has the one coach that can adjust to him, allow him to play the way he wants, and you can still win enough games where you're relevant every year. But I think they're going to have a hard time sprinting through the tape and getting to the finish line, because I just think when you play one team that runs the same thing every time off the floor, and you start to play better teams as you go on through the playoffs, and you can lock in on it and figure out how you can just make it a little less efficient. Not like you got to stop it. You just got to make it less efficient. And Golden State's already figuring out how to do this in this series, and it starts with just not fouling him on those jump shots and giving him a free 12 to 15 points at the line on three-point shots. Let's take that away, and now they can switch guys more than most teams because they got great versatility with their defenders. They're playing that smaller lineup now. So even if it's Looney or Draymond Green out there on him, they can do a decent job on him. It's just the one team that they're certainly not equipped to, but you're right. There might be other teams out there as well. And who knows, maybe a team like Toronto or Philly, whoever comes out of that round.
I'll take one of those. I think Toronto would have a better chance than Philly. I think Houston would beat Philly. I'm not so sure Houston would beat Milwaukee. But, Tim, man, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hanging on with me, man. Great analysis as always, my brother. We'll talk soon.
Always.
All right.
Buddy.
All right. Anybody, y'all heard that level of expertise. Very, very few have it. Tim Legler, the man, right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. He'll be doing pregame, postgame tonight's Philly Raptors game at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals right here on ESPN. 888-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Back with your calls to close out the show in a minute. You're listening live with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. By the way, 1-800-Flowers.com. Distance doesn't mean anything this Mother's Day. You can still brighten Mom's special day with 24 multicolored roses for $24 from 1-800-Flowers. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click the radio icon, and enter code Stephen A. That's with a PH, not a V. Your calls to close out the show in a minute.